We're doing again. We're doing it again. So I just made a video about the stop killing video games. I guess that petition, that tiny petition, that seeks to stop for companies to stop destroying the things that you buy for, you pay for, and gaming as a hobby. But Pirate Software, this guy made a response to it, and haven't watched the video, so you're catching this in real time, and we'll just give it a watch.
Pirate Software Online. I've been in the gaming industry for about 20 years. I used to work at Blizzard Entertainment, then Amazon Game Studios, and now I own my own studio, Pirate Software, by the same name, which is an indie studio, and I've been here for about 8 years now. I also run a massive community. We've got about 180,000 people in Discord, and most of what I do is try to teach other people how to make games, teach them that they can make games, show them the tools to do so, and try to do everything without any paywalls or bullshit in the way.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good thing, right? I mean, making a video game has never been so easy. Like, you yourself don't really even need to know how to do it. Like, if you have a big community, right, chances are you have a coder or a couple of artists in that community, or a translator. Like, you have to have, so you have the ability to make connections and have it done for you. I mean, and you just pay the people to do it. Like, it has never been so easy, and with lots of all the engines out, it's also has never been so standardized than ever before.
It's incredibly important to me that we keep making games and that the next generation has the tools to do so that our medium doesn't die out. And it never will. And that's the whole intention of all of this. So with that in mind, that community brought me this and tried to get me to sign it. And I don't want to. Number one, I can't because I don't live in Europe. But number two, I wouldn't sign it even if I could. And I'm going to kind of go through this and try to explain the reasoning as to why that would be the case, without all of the internet hate machine that's grown up around it. So let's go into how this works and why this is an issue to me. First things first, what is an initiative? So an initiative is actually not law. It is something that you put together so you can put it up in front of representatives and they can start the conversation. The reason why I have a problem with Stop Killing Games is specifically it starts the wrong conversation. If we're trying to kill off the practice of developers putting together a live service game, pitching it as a single player experience, and
like I said in my video, right, the point isn't for it to be legality. Like, again, the point is to start the discussion, right? The point is to get the ball rolling and to be like, okay, this is a problem. This is something that people are bringing to your table, right? And that's just the point of a petition. And I think that's fine. I mean, that's a good thing. Getting the normies into it is good.
The conversation. The reason why I have a problem with Stop Killing Games is specifically it starts the wrong conversation. If we're trying to kill off the practice of developers putting together a live service game, pitching it as a single player experience, and then taking away support in the future, this ain't it. And the reason why is specifically on this initiative, under its own description, it says, this initiative calls to require publishers that sell or license video games to consumers in the European Union or related features and assets sold for video games they operate to leave said video games in a functional playable state. Specifically, the initiative seeks to prevent the remote disabling of video games by the publishers before providing reasonable means to continue functioning of said video games without the involvement from the side of the publisher. This isn't always possible in all video games, and it doesn't call out the specific practice that this is supposedly trying to defeat. It is
I mean, but there are cases of that, right? Like, I gave the case of Battlefield 2142, but again, I also gave the case of WoW, right? And what's another? I can't really think of any other, but there's probably others where because the consumer, because the fans, because people who play the game were like, okay, we'll host our own servers, it kept it in a playable state, right? I mean, and the publishers just do not interfere with it. Like, I guess what what the petition wants is for the publisher not to interfere with, again, the consumer from keeping the game that they paid for alive. Right? I think was the point.
Incredibly vague and will damage all live service games. How would you keep League of Legends in a functional, playable state? You'd have to re-architect the entire game. The game is what is called client-server. So in client-server models, there's a server and there's a client, and all of the math, all of the game, everything happens on the server. The client just displays it. And the reason we want to do it that way is so that you can't teleport around and do a billion damage. You don't trust the client. You trust the server, the client.
Yeah, I agree with that. Cheaters are definitely, and I do believe it is difficult, right? It does take manpower. It is something that requires, a lot of, again, people to keep the server going, keep the game going. But I think that should just be lumped under the risk of putting out a video game, putting out the product, right? Is understanding that, okay, you might not exist, your company might not exist ad infinitum, but you're willing to give up a piece of the product, maybe even to the consumer, if you stop existing, right? And if the publisher stops existing. I mean, it will take effort for this to happen, but, I mean, you demand people's money for the product. They want to play the product. And again, the way to do this is to have a single player aspect, So even if the multiplayer shuts down, the game itself, the thing you can hold on to and still play, is still there. Then maybe down the lines, people will make their own third-party servers. And, I mean, this, again, I don't really know the whole ins and outs of servers and clients and all that. All I know is, again, the publisher, the company, takes the fucking money for the product, but then they can somewhere just along the lines, for any reason, just take the product away.
Client just displays what it's told, right? So if we wanted to re-architect this, we'd have to take all of that server logic, push it back out into the client, and somehow make that playable in a multiplayer-only video game. That doesn't make sense to me. So this isn't going to work for all games. Why is it calling out all games? And it's really easy to say, like, oh, that'll get worked out down the line.
And I think he's just calling it out, again, because you want money for your game. You want money for your product. That's the point. And if you take people's money for the product, at least in some form or another, rather you have a single player, or rather you have third-party servers being run by, the fans, the community. In the case of the publisher going under, I mean, I think, that product should still exist, even if your company goes down. I don't think this is unreasonable. I know it takes effort and takes manpower, but that's just something that, again, it should be lumped under the risk.
But we're dealing with government here. If we're going to be putting up these types of ideas, specifically in front of government, we need to be calling out the right issues, especially if you don't have precedent set. Because now you're going to be setting precedent on something that doesn't make any sense, with people that may not understand the nuance of our industry, all in the name of saving games. I can't agree with that. So
I kind of understand that, because say why Japan shuts down Smash Melee tournaments, and if anyone tries to get it back up, or the Japanese company Nintendo, using the law and the government, because Japan doesn't do a damn thing, Nintendo doesn't do a damn thing. Nintendo lobbies the power of legality and uses legality on their behalf to shut down, say, an unofficial Smash Melee tournament, right? That's how it works, Nintendo don't really do a damn thing. Like, they have whole legal teams that are outsourced to do this on their behalf, and their legal team talks to, the legal team of whatever country or state that's happening in, and they work that out. And again, I think that's the problem, right? The problem is it is too baked in to defend the company, but at the expense of the consumer. Even if no money is being asked for these tournaments, they will still. And it's what's happened with like Yu-Gi-Oh tournaments on YouTube. Like Konami will lobby their legal teams and their legality with YouTube to shut down that video or the copyright claim that video. And it's because copyright exists to protect companies more than the consumer. And again, technically they're not really breaking any laws. Like, it's 100% transformative. It's their decks. And they're having commentary over it. But because YouTube, values the companies over the people that actually make YouTube, like, we get in these situations. And I think it's the same thing with gaming companies and the consumer.
Let's go into why this is happening, right? So why did this start in the first place? What is the specific cases they've called out that are egregious? And they have one. It's The Crew. So, action on The Crew. The video game The Crew, published by Ubisoft, was recently destroyed for all players and had a player base of at least 12 million people. Due to the game's size and France's strong consumer protection laws, this represents one of the best opportunities to hold a publisher accountable for this action. If we're successful in charges being pressed against Ubisoft, this can have a ripple effect on the video games industry to prevent publishers from destroying more games. First off, I don't like the idea in this that it has a player base of 12 million people. That is not how long-running games work. There is a large number of people that buy the game, and that player base slowly dwindles off until nobody is playing it anymore. If there's any costs associated with keeping the game online, which this was an online video game, then eventually it costs more to keep it online than it does to keep running it, right? So the cost outweighs the amount of income for it. There are bad business practices that can occur in there. There are companies that will sell a online-only game as a single-player experience and kind of just put it into the TOS and hide it. But not all companies do that. When they do, we should be calling out that specific company, not...
Well, and again, I guess I'm being unreasonable, but I don't care if it's 12 million people playing the game or 12 people, right? Those 12 people still pay for the fucking product, and they should have that product. Like, you, the company, put that product on the market, and even if the fucking Suicide Squad game with a player base of 10 people, like, even if they drop the servers altogether, those 10 people should still be allowed to play that shitty fucking game, right? Because those 10 people gave their fucking hard-earned money, and I can never understand why the fuck they did, gave their hard-earned money to the company to play the product, and they want to play the fucking product, right? And again, this isn't unreasonable. Again, when you choose to put the product out, you accept the risk that comes along with that, and one of those risks is ensuring that even if you go under, even if you go out, that you've given away a piece of that product to allow people to keep it going. As long as they're not demanding any money for these servers to keep them going, then it shouldn't be that big of a deal. If they are demanding money, well, obviously it's illegal, but I mean, pirating is a service issue, right? It's an accessibility issue. Right, it's not really, anything else. But, yeah, I mean, again, I don't care how many people are playing it. If a single fucking person is playing that game, they should be, and that they paid their money for that game, they should be allowed to play that game 50 years from now. And if I'm being unreasonable, then the problem's the fucking law. I mean, because everyone thinks this way. For some fucking reason, Companies, when a bunch of people come together and become a company, it's like their mind just transcends this line of logic. And it boggles my mind.
Not all companies. So, let's take a look at this and find out more about The Crew itself. And if we pull up their Wikipedia, we can see that The Crew was actually created in 2014, which, much to the hatred of all of us oldies on the internet, was 10 years ago. Oh. So this was an online-only racing video game developed by Ubisoft Ivory Tower and Ubisoft Reflections and published by Ubisoft. So all Ubisoft, right? With that in mind, it said it was a scaled-down recreation of the contiguous United States and included both role-playing and large-scale multiplayer elements. So it had a massive multiplayer component to it. It is an online-only service-based game.
Yeah.
And they shut it down 10 years later. On March 31st, 2024, Ubisoft shut down the game's servers, rendering the game unplayable, which is normal for live service games. The only thing that
Yeah, and I'm saying it shouldn't be. Like, if, again, I'm not saying Ubisoft, or at least I'm not saying Ubisoft should keep it up indefinitely and be forced to keep the servers running. What I'm saying is, you know, the fans, a third party, you know, group of gamers should be able to keep the servers up on their behalf to ensure that people that paid for the crew 10 years ago are allowed to still play the game. And I don't believe that's unreasonable, right? Because they put the product out there. They put it on the market. And the people who played it, again, they own the game. And if someone wants to, I have a little bit of server hosting knowledge. If they want to host the servers on the behalf of the video game, then they should. And Ubisoft should not be able to, you know, interfere with that or have a problem with that. Again, as long as they're not paying money for the servers, I don't see where the issue is.
I can see in here that could be a problem is if they post it as not an online-only experience. But
again, for the 15th time, I don't care if they post it as an online experience, right? I pay for a product. I want to keep that product. It is that simple. And if someone's willing to keep the servers going, Ubisoft should not get involved. Again, I think a piece of the product is relinquished. A piece of the fundamental base of the product should be relinquished upon putting that product on the market. That's what I believe. And again, I'm not arguing from a legal standpoint. I'm not arguing from a business standpoint, but despite having a business management degree, I'm arguing from the standpoint of a consumer who put fucking money down for the product. I'm not really getting mad at this guy. It's just I'm mad at the situation. Like, I mean, most people want to view it as, like, argumentative instead of just having a discussion, right? Like, we're having a discussion about, you know, video games as an art form and protecting the art of video games rather than just the product of games. And I think because most companies are treating games and treating, you know, art like it's just any other product as an experience, as an artistic expression, is why we're in a situation like this.
Everything that I found online shows that the game was always marketed as online only. If you're going to be buying an online only game, that means it can only run when it's online. And if the servers need to shut down in the future, far in the future, it makes sense to me for the access to that game to be cut if it's online only. If it's
Okay, and again, I believe, yeah, the access can be cut, but someone also has the right to keep the game going. A third party, some random fucking bloke in his mom's basement that has the ability to keep that game going so that you, the consumer who bought the game, can still play the game, even when Ubisoft did the Toy Story meme of I don't want to play with you anymore with the server. Yeah, Ubisoft shouldn't get involved is what I'm trying to say, because they've already relinquished that level of freedom to the consumer.
Single player experience that has online only functionality specifically just to shut down the game in the future, and the online only doesn't actually add any gameplay functionality, I'd agree with you. That's a shitty business practice. That's really rare. And in the specific cases where it does happen, we should call out that, not just all games and not all live service games. Further, there's more context to this too. The Crew itself came out in 2014, but it actually had a sequel that came out in 2018, and then it had another sequel that came out in 2023. And if we go to the Crew's SteamDB, which again is not going to be all of the player base for this. It's only going to show the ones who were playing it through Steam. It was on multiple platforms. We look at the max here. It did start out with a sizable amount of community, and then it degraded. And it had a major drop-off in 2018, which is the same year that it launched a sequel. This is normal. When a sequel comes out, a lot of the player base, if the sequel doesn't suck, will move over to it. And then the servers effectively die. You can't run a live service game on this few players. You can't most of the time, especially not if there's anything else that goes into it. And if we go into that...
Yeah, again, I believe, again, if the company is like, oh yeah, we can't really afford to keep the servers up, we're going to relinquish part of that to the consumer, to whatever, third-party gamer or whatever, or third-party publisher. I don't see where the issue with that. And once they do that, they should stay the fuck away from the crew. Again, they decided they made the business decision to drop, a collateral, to drop the cost of keeping a server up for 10 people. So one of those 10 people should be able to keep the server going for those 10 people who paid for the product. Like, that's what I'm arguing. I'm saying once this happens and, again, an online game drops the servers, drops support for the servers of their game, someone else should be allowed to come in and be like, okay, well, we'll keep it up. And they shouldn't have any say, in the game and even in the IP. As long as if they're not paying money, if they're not wanting money for it, it shouldn't be that big of a deal anyway. Now, I think it will become a big deal if the person or publisher or group keeping these servers up are doing it for money. Like, I think that's when it should step into the realms of copyright. But until then, I mean, I don't see where the issue is or why it would be a bad thing. Because the point is to defend the consumer, not defend the company. The company already made its decision. If it doesn't want to keep the servers running for those 10 people, then okay, it doesn't have to, but one of those 10 people should be able to do it, or someone should be able to do it on their behalf, because they paid for the product. That's where I'm coming from. And I don't know if this is truly unreasonable. I mean, I think there's a lot of risk when it comes to, again, making a product, making a game, and I think this just should be lumped under one of those risks.
Than anything else, and we could see that there was license problems. So on December 14th, 2023, Ubisoft delisted the crew and its expansions from digital platforms, suspended sales of microtransactions, and announced that the game's servers would shut down on March 31st. So they gave them 3 months. Usually I would say, hey, 6 months is probably a better deal, but if they're going to do 3 months, they're going to do 3 months. The only thing that I'd be interested outside of that is if there was a contractual obligation to do more than 3 months and they didn't follow it.
Oh yeah, and again, a perfect example is this is Bloodborne. Like, we would have a Bloodborne 2, or even another Bloodborne, if Sony wasn't allowed to just shut it down and be like, we don't want to do anything with this anymore. No, fuck it, fuck this. We don't want to play with this anymore, right? If there was a legal precedent, again, for people who paid for the, well, I think you can still play Bloodborne on Sony, like, if you have the game, but you just, can you get online to Bloodborne? But even if you can, like, still, like, we wouldn't have lost Bloodborne if people were allowed to do this, allowed to be like, oh, well, we want to make something with the IP you haven't done. I think copyright and trademark, after a while, goes away. Like, it's what happened with, Winnie the Pooh as a trademark. Like, it expired, and now you have so many shit-tier Winnie the Pooh movies coming out. Like, eventually the trademark or eventually the copyright will be up. But people shouldn't have to wait 10 or so more years to be able to play a product that they've already paid for.
If it was in the terms of service or not, citing upcoming server infrastructure and licensing constraints. What were those licensing constraints? Well, it Turns out that all of the cars in the game were licensed from the car companies. And a 10-year running game likely means that they had license to them for 10 years. And that means that it would likely reopen for negotiation. Now, understand that's speculation, but I've seen this type of a deal many times in the industry while I've been working in it. So it's not unlikely. If you're going to have to renegotiate on a game that has so few players and is not turning a profit anymore, you're probably just going to forgo the renegotiation. And if those servers are aging, you're not going to want to recreate that infrastructure. And there are some people that'll say, well,
yeah, and that's fine. Like, I don't have a problem with that. Okay, if you relinquish the licensing, that's fine, but people should still be allowed to play the fucking product. Someone should be allowed, again, for free, to keep the goddamn servers running so they don't infringe on the copyright law or on the, copyright, and, they should be allowed to do this and be protected in doing so. I mean,
well, just make it all single player. Well, I've explained that doesn't make any sense in the first place. If you're making it all single player, you'd have to carve off all of that, and it's developer time and money. When you already have sequels out and the game has basically no players left anyway, it makes more sense to just move on. I don't find...
I mean, again, didn't WoW do this? Like, yes, it takes time and effort, but, again, people who paid for the product were allowed to keep that product. So, again, and I think we're going back to the whole risk argument. If you wanted people's money for the product, like, yeah, I mean, I just feel like that's something that should still be done, or at least, again, should be done by a third party, and without the company, wanting to interfere or get involved. I mean,
find that to be a problem from the developer perspective, and I understand that people find that to be a problem from the player perspective. These are two different ideologies, and that's okay to have two different ideologies. I just won't agree with it because I understand the burden that puts if we raise that problem in the way that we are right now. If you try to tell me that every studio needs to run their live service game indefinitely or not want to run one at all, then no one's going to run them. And we're going to miss out on adventures like Final Fantasy XIV. And even though I don't play anymore.
Yeah, but I mean, again, I doubt that's what anyone's really asking for. What people are asking for is, again, if someone wants to take up the helms for the product, to keep it running, for free, unlicensed, to keep the server going, the company shouldn't get involved, right? People are demanding the company run the license or run the server indefinitely. But I don't know who's really asking for that. And I don't think the petition particularly is asking for that. I just think a game that someone paid for just shouldn't be reaped from them, but just because the company doesn't want to support it anymore, and they already took your fucking money. I mean, is anyone really asking for a company to indefinitely run a server, even if it's just for one person, and take on the risk and the cost associated with that? Because I'm not. I mean,
or League of Legends, or any other live service game, any of them. You're talking everything, like even phone games, as funny as that is. A lot of people don't realize that phone games require online-only activity. What about things like Pokemon Go? What about stuff like Monster Hunter Now? What about any of these? We'd never get any of them. And that's why I think this needs to not be vague. It needs to be specific about the business practice it's trying to defeat.
I mean, again, it's a petition. I mean, it's not legal precedent. It's getting the conversation going. Then where we can expand from that. Like, again, the legal precedent isn't really the point. It's something that we can branch off of and be like, okay, maybe in this situation, like, it's just simply getting the conversation going.
Which is specifically companies that are doing this under the guise of it being a single-player game, but adding online-only functionality that is not necessary and doesn't add any gameplay elements. That's the problem. So now we're going to go to Ross. otherwise known as Accursed Farms, the creator of this initiative, and one of the ones that's pushing it the most online. I'm going to let him say exactly why he thinks that this will go through very easily and why it is important, and then I'm going to tell you why I don't agree with it.
Comes law in the EU? Yeah, it might be. Now, it's not a guarantee, but I think if we get the signatures, this passes. Why do I say that? Well, it's a few factors. Politicians like easy wins, and this doesn't require them to do much at all. And unless it involves gambling or protecting children, politicians generally don't care about video games. So this isn't of big consequence to them or most of their constituencies.
I'm going to stop it there for a moment. The assertion that politicians just like easy wins, so this legislation will go through, but the politicians don't care about a multi-billion-dollar global industry and that it doesn't matter to their constituencies is incredibly absurd to me.
Yeah, see, that's the point I made. I mean, yeah, that they absolutely do care. I mean, like I said, they probably have stocks in these companies, right? The company doing good is directly predicated on the amount of money they can get from them. I mean, yeah, I agree with that.
I don't think this is the right direction at all for a movement like this. I think it's incredibly damaging.
No, I believe this is the right direction, though.
And it makes our entire industry look bad, both on the player side and the developer side. If we're going to be putting forward anything that may eventually turn into legislation, it should be passing because it's the right thing to do for consumers and developers, and that there's some kind of a middle ground, not just because it's an easy win and politicians don't care. This sets us off on a completely wrong foot.
EU law is already unclear on a lot of this practice anyway.
And that's dangerous. If we're going to be setting precedent, which could change the way that law works all the way down the road, then we need to be sending the right message, which this is sending a vague message that doesn't cover the actual problem. So,
and again, I've also made a point on this, is because, you know, technology is, like, the legality on technology is very, very slow, right? And sometimes starting the conversation is the right movement because, again, most people don't care for the legal terminology, and lawyers know this. Like, this isn't anything that is like, oh, well, you need to be an intellectual to understand this. You need to know the right terminology and the right cadence. It's like, no, most people are not going to do this. Most people just want to maintain the fucking products that they've paid for.
this is not a win to me. This is a huge risk.
And we would be making it easy for them to settle it. It falls in line with other consumer practices. You know, how when you buy something, you're generally allowed to keep it?
In the case of live service games, in the terms of service for those, you are not buying the game. You're buying a license to the game. And that's the part that's really different here. If we don't like the idea of live service games as a whole, I get it. Don't play live service games then. Don't agree to those terms. But if we're under this...
But again, nobody reads the terms. Nobody cares. Again, like I said in my last video, 80% of people don't care for the terms of service, right? And they paid money for the game, and right, and every time you buy like a Ubisoft product, you have to accept their terms of service. Otherwise, you just don't play the product. And again, I think that's the problem, right? That's the issue. It's like you're signing for a goddamn loan, and it's like, no, I just want to play the fucking game. And I don't believe the terms of service, again, because terms of service aren't legal either. I mean, copyright is, but the terms of service isn't either. So, and I don't believe a terms of service can overthrow someone's consumer rights. And I believe if you pay money for a product, you should own that product, even if it is a live service. I understand this is probably unreasonable, but this is my stance. If you take someone's hard-earned fucking cash for a product, they should be able to play, even digitally, they should be able to play that product 50 years in the fucking future. And terms of service shouldn't be predicated on what they sign on in this terms of service. But that's my opinion.
This weird idea that we need to get rid of all live service games or damage that practice in any way to keep in line with consumer policies it is in line with consumer policies. If it wasn't, it wouldn't be there in the first place. So this doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. You're not buying the game, you're buying a license to the game. In the niche cases where a student...
Yeah, and again, I just believe that's the issue. You know, that's the problem. Is you're not buying a physical product, you're not buying the game, you're paying for the service of playing the game, because again, this is where we've gotten in the digital world, is again, you're not paying for a game on your Xbox, you're paying for the right to play a game. And at least in 2005, 6, and 7, everyone thought, oh, well, paying for the right to play a game, so for the game, that's idiotic. But now we're at the point where people are treating this like it's normal, treating this like it's acceptable, you know? Like, I'm playing a game called The First Descendant, and I mean, I don't know how that game's gonna go if the servers go down, but I know like, at least on PC, someone's gonna take the reins. Someone did for 2142, someone did for WoW. I do believe, like, Warframe will always stay up indefinitely. Like, they make too much fucking money. But again, you never know what will happen in a couple of years, you know, down the road. But at least if you have a PC, you know if there's a will, there's a way. I mean, why do you think piracy is a thing, right? If there is a will, there is a way. Even if you're not on a server and you're playing Warframe on your own, like yourself, well then, and it's not getting any updates, well, you still have the product.
Studio is trying to sell a game as if you are buying it or purchasing it or using that language specifically, and they give you a live service game instead. I agree that should change. That language should change.
Yeah.
You are not purchasing the game. You are not buying the game.
Yeah, I
you are
agree with
paying
that.
to have a license to a live service experience. I get that. Is that what this is doing, though? The initiative is not trying to call that out specifically. It's trying to say that all games need to stay in a functional, playable state.
Yeah, and I think that's fine. You know, again, if a third party can take the reins to keep that going, the company shouldn't get involved.
Which is not calling out the language that is being used to manipulate the player. Call that out specifically, not this vague bullshit.
And finally, this is a diversion from really serious topics that politicians would prefer not to deal with.
That's really gross to me as well. The idea that this is just a diversion from serious topics and they can get an easy win in and we can just push it through and there won't be a lot of pushback on it and they're not going to have to think about it too hard. That's crazy dangerous, dude. If you're going to be setting...
I mean, I don't think that's dangerous. I think that's kind of overstepping it, but I mean, that is very weird to say that. But again, the point of a petition is not to set legal precedent in the petition. The point of the petition is to get the conversation going.
Precedent. If you're going to be putting forward something that you want to start a conversation to eventually become legislation, and these are the reasons for it, not only can I not agree with you...
Yeah, again, the point is for it to become legal precedent is, okay, we branch off from what is stated in the petition so we can, you know, have some legal precedent put in and some, you know, put out. Even if there are bullcrap in the petition, we're going to be like, okay, we don't really need that. So let's keep these other things. Like that's kind of the point.
The initiative, but I can't agree with you. And I think that the tactics that you're using here are really disgusting. So yes, I won't agree with that. And I won't agree with Ross. There's no way around that. I think this is gross. To sum it all up, no, I will not be supporting the initiative Stop Killing Games. You're not going to change my mind on it because I find this language to be incredibly vague and damaging to the rest of our industry. I think that it would be bad for both developers and players down the line.
Yeah, I think that's fine if he doesn't want to, and all that. I'm not going to trash pirate gaming. You know, it's his decision. He set his mind to him not doing this, and he set the reason. I believe his reasons are sound, right? I don't believe he's coming from a point of malice towards this guy, but again, most things are online are treated more as an argument or as a debate rather than a discussion, and I just don't think that's where this should be going, you know. What's like reiterate?
in the way that it is currently written. And I think that starting a conversation that doesn't get to the core of the issue is both wasted time and leads to potentially bad outcomes. So if we want to talk about this, let's talk about the actual bad business practices. In the case that a studio is making a live service game and they sell it to you as a product, they say that you are purchasing the game or you are buying the game, when in reality you're actually purchasing or buying a license to that game. I think that we should be fighting about that. That needs to go away. A player should...
Yeah, and I agree with that wholeheartedly. You know, I don't think you should throw terms around, and terms should be used interchangeably. But again, I also consider the service to be a product in and of itself, simply because they're demanding money from you to play that product, or to play that service. I mean...
be well informed at the point of purchase that they are purchasing a license, not buying a game. And the reason that we have those licenses in the case of client-server interactions, like we had before, we're talking about client-server games, is so that they can ban you when you cheated them. They revoke your license. That's why...
Yeah, and again, everyone agrees that this is fine. Again, I fail to see who is saying, oh, if someone's cheating on multiplayer, oh, they don't have the right to ban the license. Like, I don't know who's making that argument. Because of course, cheaters should be kicked from the game, or kicked from multiplayer. Like, who's making that argument that they shouldn't? I mean, again, the way I see it is, the argument is people who paid for the game or the license should keep the game or the license if the game goes on. And again, I hate calling it a license, because at the end of the day, you are still purchasing the game. You know, you're paying full retail price for the game, and even if they say it's a license, it's still a product, and you should be able to play that product even if the company drops it. Again, if someone else decides to take the reins and keep the servers going, like a third party or a single person wants to do that, the company decided to drop the product, and shouldn't get involved in that process. I mean, I think that's where the petition's going.
Why they revoke your license, to protect the gameplay of every other player that you're impacting when you cheat at these games. That needs to exist, but it needs to be better informed to the player at time of purchase. So I agree on that. This doesn't bring that up, though. It just attacks all video games.
Yeah, because I think that's... And here's the thing, like, you try to assume that there are things people understand, but then people bring these arguments up. It's like, yeah, I mean, I assume we're all on this page, but I guess I have to say it.
Games that have online-only components, and says that they need to keep being able to be played indefinitely. That doesn't make any sense to me. Aside from that, a lot of people really like live service games as they exist now.
I mean, I do.
So trying to kill off all live service games, as some people have said online.
I mean, Warframe, I guess you could argue, well, it's free, but I mean, you know, saying so is the First Ascendant. Would they be considered live service? I guess so, but they're free games. You're really only paying for cosmetics. But then you have, like Blizzard, like Overwatch, at least the first one, that demands money up front. The first one was fine. But you have games that demand full retail game price up front, and then they're a live service, because then you have to pay for skins and all that and other things, and they keep the servers going. I guess they'd be considered live service, but I know Warframe existed before that cringe term even came to existence.
Doesn't make any sense either. Live service games are a great way to get away from the real world. They are about social interaction between players. Some people get married in them. Some people met their spouse and got married. It's a really cool thing for a point in time in which you're having that social experience. And to destroy that just because you don't like them is very weird. I don't think that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, but that's not what the petition's saying. Do we read the same? Never mind.
I also don't think it makes sense the way that Ross is posing this as why it's going to pass. I think that's incredibly inflammatory and could lead to a lot of damage to both what he's trying to stop and to games as a whole. To say that the government just...
Again, I don't believe that. I just don't believe I should stop pausing after every point and let him finish. But I don't believe the point of the petition is... I don't believe it's damaging. I believe the point is just to just start the conversation. But that's the point of a petition. Like, it doesn't need legal jargon. It doesn't need legality. And he doesn't need to use... he doesn't really need to hit everything, every topic on the head, every minutia, and have it in the petition. The point is just start the conversation. Then from there, we can, have certain things be legal precedent and see, okay, which falls under consumer protection and which doesn't, and we can start from there.
Just doesn't care and this is an easy win and we're going to get it through is disingenuous. You're talking about a multi-billion-dollar global industry. To think that the government isn't going to be meticulously looking through this and looking for flaws and holes is absurd. So I don't think that's honest at all, and I find it disgusting. So for everyone who's mad about that, fine. Be angry about it. I'm not going to change my stance on that because I can't agree with this, both as a dev and a player. I see the...
Yeah, I'm not really mad that he thinks of it this way. I'm just saying, again, the point of a petition isn't to set legal precedent off rip. It's to just, get the ball rolling. And I mean, I'm fine. I don't care if he doesn't sign it. I wish I could sign it. And I 100% agree with the petition, even if there's some terminology in there that could be considered inflammatory. I mean, we're to the point where it has to be. If we're to this point where the petition has to exist, well, then we're already in a dark timeline, and the discussion's already taken place. Like, other people are talking about this. I'm just one goofy dude in my fucking house with a mic talking about it, but there's people a hell of a lot bigger than me that are talking about this. Pirate Software is talking about this. I mean, this is the point of the petition. That's the point of his video. Like, he achieved the purpose, and I think this is a good purpose. All right, and what we're doing right now is good. Like, we're pointing out the minutia, pointing out situations where developers should be protected, or both the developer and the consumer should be protected. Like, we're pointing these things out right now, and that's what's the point of the petition. That's the point of the video. And I mean, that's really all I gotta say about this. I mean, I haven't really disagreed. Like, if what some of the stuff he's saying, I mean, I don't think the petition is gross or inflammatory or this, that, and the other. I just think the point it's achieving its goal, getting people talking about it, right? And it's not supposed to be legal. It's just supposed to be in a way that everyday people can digest it, and I think that's a good thing overall. Even if some things in there that he put in there, or some of his points, some of Ross's points are kind of like elementary. I mean, I think the petition overall is a good thing. But that's all I gotta say about this. Peace.